Welcome to our second Palestine Israeli talk. We had this talk before, about 2-3 years ago. I'm not actually sure. To make it clear, in this talk, I will be talking only about facts, no speculations, no conclusions. I mean, I guess there will be conclusions, just no speculations. It will only be hard facts, and I'll try to keep it short so people will actually watch this and get something from it. Because if it's gonna be too detailed and too long, then I'm sure people would just skip through. Palestine-Israeli conflict is one of the most complicated conflicts there ever honestly was. There is so much to it, it's insane, so you won't get everything from this video, you will get only the main important points. And we'll try to do it by a timeline, meaning from the past to the present. So, first, what is Palestine? Palestine is a land that was never really anyone's, because the nations that actually occupied the land, or lived on the land rather, kept changing. It was the Jews, then it was Arabs, then it was Jews again, then it was Arabs, and Christians came with their crusade. There was many wars happening. The reason this needs to be said is to understand the animosity between the Jews and the Arabs in Palestine. So there was already a hate between these two nations because of this past, because of religion, shit like that. I don't really want to go into detail with it because I don't think it's important. The only important part of this is that they don't like each other. And they have a reason for it. Whether it's a good reason or not, that's up to you. This conflict began thanks to someone we all know, Adolf Hitler, in the was it Second World War? Why do I always not remember? I'm pretty sure Hitler was Second World War, right? In the Second World War, when Hitler decided to kill all the Jews in Europe, he also stole their property, right? Their houses, their living, companies, everything that Judah has had was abolished by Hitler. So when the war ended, all of these Jews that got released from concentration camps and ghettos all over Europe had nowhere to go because where they lived was no longer there. And so someone had the idea, I think it was the USA, I'm not completely sure, so don't take my word for it, had the idea that they should make their own land. And where else to make their land than in the Jesus land, right? Jesus was born in Palestine. Jesus was an Arab. And he was a Jew as well. He was a progressive Jew, but he was still a Jew. So they decided that the new land would be Israel. They went to Israel, but the Palestinians were already there. Now, to understand who Palestinians were at the time, it was not exactly a nation. I mean, you could call them a nation, but it was honestly like small groups of people all over the land. You can imagine this more like some kind of an age of empires kind of world where you have like villages all over the place, with Jerusalem obviously being the center for religious reasons. But the reason why this is so important, Palestine was not like a complete unit. It was not a country as we imagine it. It was just multiple clans, I guess this is a good word. Like some clan believed like Muslim believed the Quran to the letter, while others were more like liberal, some were more progressive, and they had some wars within each other. There were bandits, shit like that. It was a very underdeveloped land with a lot of internal conflict, but not really any conflict outside the region. So while they had some wars inside, they didn't really do wars with other countries, and other countries didn't wage wars against them because on the south of Palestine, there were a lot of Egyptians, there were a lot of, what's the country? Jordanis on the east. Like, a lot of people mixed up together, right? So when Jews came to establish their new nations, the resistance they found was not exactly strong. There was not much resistance because the Palestinians couldn't unite each other against them, even though they didn't want Jews there, obviously, as we know, historic conflict. They couldn't really unite themselves to take them out. So it was more like, I don't know, I don't want to say a number, like a couple of different small groups of people, or sort of not wanting Jews there, but none of them being big enough to actually stop them from taking the land. So in 1946, Israelis started to settle the land. As you can see, the white here in 1946, the white is where the Israelis came, the green are Palestinians. The Israelis were in a much better position. They were united as one front. They were financed by both Europe and America, so they had better weapons, better technology, and they decided to take the advantage of it. I mean, the first obvious choice was to take complete control over Jerusalem and then dissolving the Palestinians' leaderships in the small groups, so the resistance is as small as possible. And they mostly achieved that. As you can see, United Nations made a plan of how to split Israel and Palestine so the both countries can live next to each other, which was not, as you can see, very nice to Palestine. It was agreed to, but Israelis thought it's not enough, so they kept chipping away at Palestinians, taking their land. As you can see, Gaza was established already in the 50s. And this is a very important point because when Gaza was completely separated from the rest of Palestine, they finally had to unite as one country. So two parties were established. One party was the Radical Party, and it was, I'm not sure if it was called Hamas at the time, it was definitely at least the predecessor to today's Hamas, but they were the terrorist political party that wanted to get the Jews out in any way possible from the Palestinian land. The other party was the Communist Party of Palestine that was way less radical, and even though they were still okay with waging a war against the Israelis, they were also open to negotiations of how to separate the land where both Palestinians and Israelis can live in the land of Palestine. What happened then is probably the most important part in the 50s. I think it was in the 50s, maybe it was in the 60s. What happened is that Israeli wanted the full control. They do not want Palestine to have any control whatsoever over the land. And since they were technologically advanced, they had the finances from the West, which is much richer than Jordan and Egypt that supported Palestine. They knew that they can win the war if there is a war. The way to guarantee the war, Israelis decided to do something very radical. You could actually say terroristical, and it was an act of terrorism by Israelis. What Israelis did is that they assassinated the Communist Party of Palestine. They killed them off. Hamas took power. Since then, Hamas was in power. That way, Israel could wage a war because Palestine would always wage a war because there's terrorists leading Palestine now. At this point, the war was won for Israelis, and it still is. Now, Israeli had a full financial support, full military support from America because they were defending themselves against Hamas, the Hamas that they created, so they can defend themselves and they can keep expanding their land against the international law without the international community stopping them. Throughout this time, from 1950 to the present, Israeli committed an insane amount of war crimes. For examples, murdering innocent civilians, obviously, murdering children, imprisoning children, stealing land from the Palestinians, and general apartheid and an actual, you could say, genocide of the Palestinian people. That is a fact. Israelis did that. They did it all in the name of defending themselves. But anyone who knows history knows that this defending themselves was created by them. Now we go all the way to the present. Israel now, in the current time, this is the map from 2012, controls basically the entire Palestine. There are these Palestinian dots on the map, as you can see. They are literally ghettos, most of them, at least in Jerusalem. The current Palestinians living in Jerusalem live in a way that they have to live in a ghetto. They don't live, all the ones that did not live in ghetto, their houses were taken from them by the Israeli courts. Like, literally, the Israeli court said, this house is no longer yours. It's now Jew land, no longer yours. They literally took all Palestinians' houses and they put them in ghettos. There's also a separation of roads in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Israel in general, but Jerusalem it's more concentrated and easier to see, where basically Israelis can use all the roads, while Palestinians are only allowed to use some roads. And the roads the Palestinians are able to use, hopefully I'll find that. Map of ghettos in Jerusalem. It was a really good map that I saw before, but I don't know if I can find it right now. Holy shit, this is the tiniest fucking picture ever. You can't read shit from that. Let me try one more. Yeah, I can't find a map I wanted. I'm sure one of these actually say that, but let's just use any fucking map whatsoever, whatever. Aviv, Jericho, Jerusalem. Fuck, it's too big of a map. Just need Jerusalem, man. Alright, I can't find a map. Basically, like, you could imagine it something like this. You have, like, I think it's 3 main ghettos in Jerusalem, right? Like, basically, like 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot. Like, let's imagine it's these 3 dots. And the roads the Palestinians are able to take are only between them, meaning the rest of Jerusalem is closed off for them. They can legally still move around, but they cannot use the roads, meaning they can only walk. Otherwise, they get arrested. So that is the current situation in Jerusalem, which is, as horrible as it sounds, that's the good way of living for Palestinians. You have then 2 other Palestinians groups of living. The first is in the still non-taken lands of Palestinians. Those are the farmers, basically. They just farm, they live off the land. They're completely separated from the world. It's just like tiny communities working together. Those are slowly getting destroyed. Israelis just come, they just destroy their houses and tell them to leave. They don't tell them where to leave, they don't pay them anything, they just tell them to get the fuck out. And like, they do not necessarily force them, they just tell them to fuck off after they destroy their house. So you can stay there, living on the ground with no house. If you try to build another house, the Israelis come and destroy it again until you leave. It's not legal, obviously. The international law forbids stuff like this, but no one stops Israel. Then all these people, obviously, the only option for them is either go to Gaza, which is no longer an option, really. I don't think Israelis let new people in Gaza, so their other option is try to cross the border, which can be very dangerous because Israelis killed an insane amount of Palestinians on the border. It really depends what mood they have. Like, a lot of soldiers kind of act on their own and just shoot Palestinians for fun. It really does happen. Israel never apologizes for it as a country, and the soldiers, as far as we know, are not reprimanded. Therefore, you can assume it is with the Israeli government blessing that they do that. So you can take this risk that you actually manage to cross the border to Jordan, which is probably the most allied country to Palestine in the current age. Or your other option is to end up in one of Jerusalem ghettos. No, neither option is really good. And then we get to the third part of Palestinian people, which is the Gaza Strip. Everyone knows, everyone heard about Gaza. What is Gaza? This is the map of Gaza. You can't see it completely through my cam. Let me do it like this. So Gaza, what it is not a city, as some people might think. It is not a country, as some people think. It does operate as a city, it does operate as a country, but it is neither. It is an open air prison. It is a massive open air prison. Let me check what is actually the population of Gaza right now. 600,000 people. So it's like half the Prague, I guess you could say, for Czech people. The way this works is that the entire land is closed off by Israeli. There are units all over the border. They watch who goes out, who comes in. If you go out from Gaza without the permit of Israel, you get shot. There is no negotiation, you do get shot. Either you get the approval from Israelis to leave, which depends on the situations. For example, some medical reasons can be enough to leave for Jerusalem to find a doctor, because obviously the technology in Gaza is fucking atrocious. Or I'm not sure honestly what all the reasons are, so you can Google it, but they're definitely not the reasons you would assume. I mean, you would assume the way it is described, Gaza is a terroristic land, right? So like, if there are innocent people, why don't they just leave? Well, they can't. Israel shoots them unless it allows them to leave. But these reasons, there is not many reasons you can actually leave Gaza. Then probably you could say, then why don't they leave by the sea? The sea is completely closed off as well. This entire area is closed off by I'm pretty sure it's United Nations that do that, so Europe. It is closed off, therefore nothing through the sea gets in or out of Gaza without Europe knowing. And probably the best chance for Gaza people to leave is through the Egyptian border, which is on the south, right here. But it is not, as you might imagine, that the border is right, like this is the border between Egypt and Gaza. It is not. It's actually, I believe it's like 20 or 30 kilometers that you have to cross before you actually get to Egypt. And yes, Israel has a control over this area as well. So these people are fucked. If you are born in Palestine, you are considered a terrorist and you are a prisoner. This whole thing, everything that I'm describing, is against international law. Israel has no no right to do any of this. Europe has no right to do any of this. It is considered a war crime. It is a lot of war crimes combined, but no one gives a fuck for obvious reasons. Because the reason you denounce war crimes is to either stop a country or weaken a country from destroying your allies, right? But Israel is the ally of America, Israel is the ally of Europe, meaning there is no objectiveness while deciding what of all of this is a war crime. So we go to today's date, and the situation did develop. We've been in this mate situation for a long time where Gaza with Hamas. Coco, please, Jesus fucking Christ, leave. Where Hamas is shooting rockets over to Israel. Israel is committing war crimes, locating people, genociding Palestinians, and Hamas just shoots more rockets. Israel, obviously, everyone knows about the Iron Dome. They have the defense against those rockets. It is not 100% effective, meaning that some of those rockets from Hamas definitely did kill Israeli civilians, but the casualties on the Gaza side are obviously way worse because they do not have any defense systems against rockets from Israel. That Israel shot many rockets to Gaza as well, killing insane amount of people, both innocent, both terrorist, military of Gaza. Again, a war crime. Israel also, I believe that was 2 years ago, decided to shoot the only reporter station in Gaza, which was called Al Jazeera, I think. They were the ones reporting about what happens in Gaza, since they were reporting about about civilians getting murdered. Then Israeli just shot rockets on the reporter tower and destroyed all the equipment for the Gaza reporters, so they cannot no longer report another war crime. Now in the current age, we do have a massive development, which unfortunately is very, very bad. An ultra Orthodox Jew, also a fascist, not even a fascist, an actual Nazi called Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to get full power over Israel, over the entire country. The way to do that, he needs to abolish courts, because the power in Israel is the parliament, the prime minister, and then the courts. Obviously, the parliament gets their own prime minister, so their powers are aligned, but the courts are supposed to be independent. The courts are not independent for sure. They are very Israel leaning, meaning that's how they legally take the homes from Palestinians in Jerusalem, for example, because the courts just say that's how it is and you can't really do anything against it. But they're not necessarily pro Benjamin Netanyahu. So for him to get full power, he needs to either control the courts or abolish them. I'm not entirely sure which one of these two he's trying to do right now, but he is trying to do that. For the past 3 months, there were massive, massive protests against it from Israel itself, all over the world, but Israel itself. The nation itself, it was pretty much split, as it seemed. 50 agreed with it, Benjamin Netanyahu, 50% didn't. So what happened is that the parliament, including Benjamin Netanyahu, said that we will delay passing of this law that would lead to him having full power. So they delayed it, and what happened next is that Israelis starting raiding Palestinians. They started raiding mosques, they started raiding villages, and they started raiding Gaza. Basically provoking Palestinians on all fronts. Some small conflicts begin to happen. Some Israelis died, some Palestinians died. And it all escalated to yesterday, which is when Gaza, or I'm sorry, not Gaza, Hamas, decided to launch full attack against Israel. They also used the law. I'm not sure if it's a religious law, if it's a country law, and I can't tell you what it is in Arabic, but basically it means that every soldier gets full right to do whatever they want, and the only organ they have to question is the Gaza parliament. Meaning that if a commander says we are retreating or don't shoot civilians, and the soldiers shoot civilians, the commander cannot reprehend him because the commander no longer has the power over that soldier. So the soldiers are allowed to do whatever monstrosities they can. And as we know, a lot of monstrosities happened. A lot of civilians were shot. I believe children died on both sides, of course. While Israel is obviously saying the children they kill is because the children are with the commanding officers of Hamas, so they had to die as well. Hamas is way more radical. They just fucking kill them. And this full war, what it is supposed to do, and that is a fact, I'm telling you, this is not a speculation, as much as it sounds a speculation. It is supposed to give Benjamin Netanyahu full power, because when you're in a war as two countries, it's not a very good idea to question your government. It's way better to support your government. So this entire war right now, this day, is caused by one person, just like Russia-Ukraine. It is not as clear as day as in Russia and Ukraine, where Putin is behind everything. Here, it is the same shit. One crazy fucking Nazi wants full power, wants to be remembered by history. This time it's Benjamin Netanyahu for Israel. He caused the war, and he's the one who needs to be stopped to even have a chance to stop this war, because this is honestly way more complicating than the Russia-Ukrainian war. Because there, if you...
You cannot judge me.
Thanks, Shmukutsian.
I am justice itself. We were meant for more than this. To protect the innocent. But if our precious laws bind you all to inaction, then I will no longer stand as your brother.
I'm sorry, the Palestine population actually increased insanely. Oh no, that's Palestine population. I mean, Gaza population. I was like, what are these now? But it still did. Near Gaza. Okay, the Gaza population is actually 2 million people. It's way more today. But, alright, so right now, this person wants full power. He's willing to kill children, he's willing to kill women, he's willing to kill civilians, he's willing to cause all the war crimes in the world, torture people in prison. That's something Israel also does. It has been confirmed. He's willing to do anything to gain full power in Israel. And the only one who can stop him is Israelis, but they are in a bad position, right? I mean, first they are being brainwashed completely by Israel government that Palestinians, and this is not a joke, are not actual humans. That is actually the Israeli propaganda. They are trying to convince the entire nation of Israel that Palestinians are not actually humans, meaning that you can do whatever you want with them, and it's not against the teachings of God, because they're not human. And he's willing to do anything to gain absolute power. It is very disgusting what Israel has done. Another thing very important here is Israel can end this war at any time in multiple ways. Israel can negotiate with Palestine, separate the land to make into independent countries. Israel can also just turn off fresh water from Gaza completely because Israel, as I said, the blockade around Gaza is 100%. They also control the fresh water that flows to Gaza. There is no actual fresh water. Israel can just turn it off if they want. Just make them all thirst to concede. That's also an option. They can completely destroy Gaza with the technology they have. They can do that as well. Israel has insane amount of options how to completely end this war, and they had these options for the past 50 years. They never did it. The reason why they never did it, it's because it keeps the money flowing from US, it keeps money flowing from Europe. Europe and US also gain because they can test their new equipment because they don't actually wage wars anywhere, right? So like you can develop new war equipment, but how do you actually use it? How do you test it out? Does it work? They just send it to Israel, make them test it out on fucking Palestinians. So yeah, Israel is in complete control of this war. They're the only ones who can stop it. Palestinians do not have a choice. That is also one thing I would like to do. When you have war between two groups, the way to decide like who should I root for? Well, you have A, the military of the one group, B, military of the second group, and then you have civilians of the one group and civilians of the second group. If we compare this to Russian-Ukrainian conflict, then we have A, invading army of Russia into Ukraine. B, Ukrainian army is just defending against the Russian army. Then you have A, Russian civilians not being affected at all, and B, Ukrainian civilians dying, because Russia actually does target civilians as well. So it's very easy to choose a side in this scenario. In this scenario, it's of Palestine, Israel, it's way more difficult because you have A, the army of Israeli attacking the land of Palestine, but you have also the Palestine army, and again, I would rather use Hamas army than Palestine army here, attacking the land of Israel, so that basically kind of cancels each out, right? And then you have Israeli citizens that are mostly innocent, not doing anything, but they do kind of do have the power of, since Israel is in charge of this conflict, they can end it whenever. They have the power of at least elect and protest against the Israeli government to affect it. And then you have Palestinian people that don't really have any options. Like, Palestinian people can either choose to support Hamas or they can choose to do nothing because there is no opposition to Hamas. The opposition that Hamas had was assassinated by Israel. Israel didn't want an opposition to Hamas. So Palestinian people have completely zero power over anything. Also, what is important to note, Palestinian people do not have passports because Palestine does not exist according to international law. Palestine is not a country. If you look at Google Maps, which is fucking disgusting, but if you look at Google Maps, you'll find out there is no Palestine on Google Maps. It's just Israel. There is no Palestine whatsoever. Palestine does not exist. Therefore, if you are a Palestinian, you do not have nationality. You do not get Israeli nationality. You have none. You do not exist in the international law. What does that mean for them? Well, that means that if they're the lucky ones that were not born in Gaza and are not completely surrounded by military, and they try to leave from West Bank, they're one of the farmers that still wasn't evicted, they can't actually leave. Without passport, you can't enter another country, at least not legally. Meaning you can try to cross stealthily, try to create new identity without being discovered, or you just get caught and get sent to prison. Or worse, you get shot on the border, which happens a lot in the Middle East, obviously. So the Palestinians are the most unlucky people in the world. There is no worse spawn point in this world probably than being born in Gaza right now. These people have zero options. They cannot do anything. They can either join Hamas and cause atrocities on the Israeli side, or they can do nothing and just experience atrocities from the day they're born to the day they die. It is absolutely brutal. Can we, as people, do something from Europe and NA to stop it? No. We have no power over this. Our countries do support them. It is impossible to ever get majority of people in any Europe country or American country to stand against Israel because all the medias are completely controlled to be pro-Israel. Like, I've been watching news for the past 10 years. If you look at the pro-Israel and anti-Israel news, even though Israel is the aggressor, Israel is the one who can stop the war, Israel is the one who committed more war crimes. I'm not saying Hamas also committed war crimes, of course they did. They are terrorists. But Israel committed more war crimes than Hamas. There's probably one anti-Israel article for every 20 pro-Israel articles in any news in any of the Western country. It is brutal. Therefore, no, there will never be majority of people that will protest against their governments to stop supporting Israel. The only one who can stop this war right now are the Israeli people. If they can stop Netanyahu, if they can stop his government from trying to take full power, to stop spreading Nazi rhetorics. Alright, I haven't talked about the Nazi rhetorics. There is an ultra-Orthodox, there are two ultra-Orthodox, I would say, parties in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is one in the second most ultra-Orthodox. There is actually one that is even worse. But they both pretty much agree with each other on what to do. So I will throw one example. There is not a Jew as a Jew, as they would say. Basically, there were a lot of African Jews migrating to Israel when Israel was established. Black people. What Israel did is that they allowed all of them to stay, but they sterilized every single African woman that entered the country to not spread their genes in their country. Absolutely disgusting. Very, very Nazi. So there is not a Jew as a Jew. They actually are Nazis. The government of Israelis are right now are Nazis. They believe in basically what Hitler was teaching, which is insane because Hitler is the reason Israel actually exists. And they just it's just insane to me, you know, that Hitler just kills millions of Jews all over Europe, and then they create Israel to find peace and not be oppressed. And the first thing they do is that they oppress the nation right next to them and start doing the exact same shit Hitler did. Like, you now have ghettos, you have limited fucking movement for people, limited roads, you have an open air prison over fucking Gaza. Like, literally everything Hitler would do is what Israel is doing to Palestine. So yeah, do not hate on the Palestinian people. We do not support what Hamas does. Hamas are terrorists. That is a fact. They are bad people. But not all Palestine is Hamas. I'm pretty sure that Hamas is the minority of Palestine. There just can't be any opposition to them because Hamas does have a full control over the Gaza Strip, meaning if some party tries to gain power, Hamas will just destroy them, kill them. I don't really know how they operate. They imprison them forever, they torture them to change their thoughts, or they just execute them. Could be any of the three, really, but it's just impossible to create a counter political party to Hamas. So Palestinians really do not have a choice. And I found this video. I actually played it before, but the one I played when I talked about this the first time was actually the short version. I actually found the older version. And this is the Ghassan Kanafani and the era of revolutionary Palestinian media. This is the 50s.
There are some voices, rare ones, that can take a moment in time and give it meaning. Voices of clarity that are themselves not easily defined. Ghassan Kanafani, a writer, artist, journalist, playwright and politico, was one of those people.
As surely as the Middle East turmoil keeps away the tourists.
A video from 1970, a news report, captures Kanafani in the city where he made his name.
In Beirut, a new business has developed. Revolution.
This is after, I'm sorry.
Revolution.
He's interviewed by Richard Carlton for Australia's ABC News.
The Beirut leader of the Popular Front is Ghassan Kanafani. He was born in Palestine but fled in 1948, as he puts it, from Zionist terror.
As the English-speaking spokesman of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, Kanafani made good TV, but he was by no means an easy interviewee.
It does seem that the civil war, has been quite fruitless.
It's not a civil war. It's a people defending themselves against a fascist government.
It's a moment of great confidence, of clarity of vision, of conviction. And the way Ghassan Kanafani speaks in that clip shows all of this energy that was the hope of the Palestinian revolution.
Well, the conflict.
It's not a conflict. It's a liberation movement fighting for justice.
Well, whatever it might be best called.
It's not whatever.
Kanafani picks up on a very important word, which for me resonated the strongest. And this is the word whatever.
This is exactly where the problem starts. This is a people who is discriminated, is fighting for his rights. This is a story.
And this is the narrative that Palestinians unfortunately have not been able to relay to the world. The Palestinian narrative as narrated by Palestinians is not something that the world wants to hear.
Why not just talk?
Talk to whom?
Talk to the Israeli leaders.
That's kind of conversation between the sword and the neck, you mean?
Ghassan said it in simple and clear language. How are we supposed to have dialogue? You're coming to slaughter me. Put aside the sword so we can have a conversation.
They're better that way than dead, though.
Maybe to you, but to us, it's not. To us, to liberate our country, to have dignity, to have respect, to have our mere human rights, is something as essential as life itself.
In the Arab imagination, Kanafani is remembered for his storytelling, which explored the Palestinian experience, statelessness, separation, and exile. In the West, he was the public face of the leftist PFLP, seen as one of the more radical Palestinian factions. Kanafani was not involved in the armed wing of the PFLP or in the planning of high-profile airplane hijackings that the group became synonymous with. But he was an advocate of armed struggle and understood its mediatic value. If it went quiet, he wrote, no TV network would willingly give any Palestinian a minute of coverage to express themselves. Above all, though, Kanafani was a journalist, an accomplished one.
Ghassan Kanafani was a multifaceted, multi-talented human being. He was very significant in the Kuwaiti and Lebanese press in their heyday. We're talking about the 1950s and 60s. Ghassan Kanafani was a central figure. I mean, he was associated with the founding of many magazines and newspapers throughout the region.
Beirut in the 1960s and 70s was an extremely vibrant city. It was a truly Arab city, and the Palestinian Revolution was kind of the last hope for people. And so that's why Arabs from all over went to Beirut to be part of that last front for revolution and creativity and activity and literature and journalism.
After the defeat of Arab regimes in the War of 1967 and the disillusionment that came with it, Palestinians took matters into their own hands. A national struggle for liberation took form, and for Kanafani it marked a shift in thinking to the revolutionary politics of the PFLP. In 1969 he was made editor-in-chief of Al-Hadaf, the group's newly formed weekly magazine. Al-Hadaf was revolutionary in spirit and substance. It combined the PFLP's political messaging with analysis, humour, art and calligraphy in a chronicle of the Palestinian resistance that linked it to anti-colonial struggles in Africa, Asia and Latin America.
He made left-wing media accessible well beyond the narrow confines of the already converted. He went after arguments by fellow Arab journalists as much as he went after arguments by Western journalists. His articles were an unusual combination of satire, sharp witticism, as well as information. I mean, can you imagine Soviet communist literature using humor and irony at that time? There was none of that. And Arab communists were even more dour, more humorless than the Soviet Union. So you can imagine when Ghassan Kanafani comes with this new form of media, it was entirely novel.
Al-Hadaf had an open-door policy that made it a hub of cultural and artistic exchange. It was there that Kanafani and his associates produced some of the most iconic posters of the Palestinian Revolution. It was a progressive magazine with an engaged international readership, but it was the official party organ, some would say the mouthpiece, of the PFLP.
كلمة mouthpiece ما بحبها.
I don't like the term mouthpiece. It's not true. Neither was it propaganda. We were not spreading propaganda. We were trying to get the truth to the people. That was the slogan of Al-Hadaf. It read, "The truth is always revolutionary," which is what Lenin wrote. These truths were the refugee camps or the truth of the Palestinian situation. Al-Hadaf was open to accept all kinds of new ideas. And for this reason, I think the importance of literature and journalism and culture from that era is that it was the founding culture.
Kanafani left a distinctive imprint on the Arab cultural and media space. There is his pioneering fictional writing, and then there is this huge body of journalistic work. And when you look at the range of his output, you get the sense perhaps that he knew his time was limited, that he had a target on his back. On the 8th of July 1972, Kanafani and his niece were killed in a car bomb outside his home. He was 36. It was among the first in a series of Israeli assassinations targeting Palestinian leaders and cultural figures. In its obituary of Kanafani, Lebanon's Daily Star said he was a commando
This is the birth of Hamas.
who never fired a gun, whose weapon was a ballpoint pen, and his arena, newspaper pages.
Israel decided to go after all facets of the Palestinian national movement. Whether they were writers, journalists, combatants, they made no distinction whatsoever. They wanted to extinguish the flame of the Palestinian national movement in all its forms. Ghassan Kanafani has gone through two lives. There was the life that he actually lived on this planet, and there was a second life that he has been living after his death, especially in the last 20 years.
His iconic image is almost everywhere. There's so many Facebook pages dedicated to him, Instagram pages. Resistance for him was something that was not necessarily just an action. The heart of resistance could be in the written word, and this voice of hope and aspiration and clarity and conviction we don't have anymore, and that's why this resonates so strongly with us today.
So this was the representatives of the Communist Party. And if I find this... And this person was probably the person who was the most likely to negotiate peace between Israel and Palestine. Israel killed him, it was Mossad. And people who don't know that Mossad is the FBI of Israel or CIA, not sure which one of those two. Basically, terroristic group. They assassinate people that they don't like. They killed the entire communist movement of Palestine, and that is what gave birth to Hamas. And as we know, since then, Israel did not assassinate Hamas. They could assassinate Hamas at any time. They have the technology to do that. They could kill every single leader of Hamas that comes up, but they don't. Why? If I could find this, might not be able to. So yeah, as I said, I won't go to the speculations part of this. In my opinion, in my conclusion, the only way this war stops is if the Israeli people stop it. The Israeli people do stop their government. They stop Netanyahu and his ultra-Orthodox ally from the second group. If they don't, this is gonna get brutal. Netanyahu will become the new Hitler in the Middle East, not in Europe, so I guess we don't have to be worried. And Palestine will cease to exist at one point once Israel gets the full control of the Middle East, and they don't have to be worried about Iran and their nuclear warheads once they test all their fucking technology to the absolute limit. What Israel does then, no one knows. Maybe Israel will conquer Jordan, maybe they will conquer all the Arabic countries around them. But yeah, that is the speculation part. All we can do is hope that Israelis will grow conscious. They will go against their government propaganda. They will stop Benjamin Netanyahu, and they will finally elect a government that is willing to negotiate with Palestine, give Palestinians human rights, give them place to live without being oppressed, without being fully controlled. But honestly, even this best case scenario does sound at this point kind of like a fantasy, because the amount of atrocities Israelis did to this point, and by Israelis, obviously I mean the government and the army, is so much that, like, even if you do give Palestinians a land right now, like, will they accept it? I mean, I would hope they would for their children. But like all these Palestinians, all these parents, like the amount of horrors they had to live through for the past 60 years, I'm not sure they will be able to accept it. Like so many of their family probably got murdered by Israelis. And like for you just saying that, like, yeah, you can live where you live, like it doesn't really sound like a fair conclusion, does it? But that is the main point I want to make. Israelis are in control. Benjamin Netanyahu has the full power. He's the one causes this war. Every single dead child, civilian, every fucking tourist from Europe, as we fucking read all over the news how fucking terrible Hamas is. And it is terrible. Hamas is terrible. But all of these people who die are on Benjamin Netanyahu's head. And he's not gonna stop. The only one who can stop it are the Israeli people. And I fucking hope they will. As I said, the Israeli nation is split. It's about 50-50. 50% people supporting their Nazi leader, 50% don't. We fucking have to hope that the 50% that don't support fascism actually wins. If they don't, it's gonna be disgusting. This is like, if you read about the struggles of Uyghurs in China and the struggles of... Fuck, I'm not sure. What is the... Those are not... Are those also Uyghurs, the one getting oppressed by Turkey in Syria? Like, whatever is happening to these people is fucking terrible, but it's gonna be absolutely nothing compared to what happens to Palestinians if this continues the way Netanyahu wants. That's it.